Geige Akutami, the author of JJ Gay.
Wait, no, redo. The gay goggles are gonna come after us, man. I mean, the JJK fans are gonna get mad at you.
Oh, damn, alright. Geige Akutami, the author of Jujutsu Kaisen. Geige Akutami, the author of Disney Kaisen Clubhouse. Geige Akutami, the author of Jujutsu Kaisen, just ended the final chapter, and there's been some people who have shown their fair share of disappointment, saying that the ending was rushed and that the story didn't cover a lot of plot points. Some people say JJK fell off in Shibuya, JJK fell off in Colon Games, JJK fell off in Gojo vs Sukuna, JJK fell off in blah blah blah, but what if I were to tell you, JJK never fell off? For a story to fall off, it should already be at a prestigious level to begin with. For example, Game of Thrones was once known as one of, if not, the greatest show of all time, until the last few seasons completely destroyed its reputation. The Promised Neverland Season 1 is known to be one of the greatest first seasons in anime, until the second season completely screwed over everything. These are actual examples of what a true fall-off is. They were godlike at one point, and then at one point the quality of the show made a complete nosedive. JJK was never on that type of timing. It just wasn't. JJK has been consistently a mediocre to okay show through its whole entire runtime. You could say that the quality of the show declines after Shibuya or whatever point in the story you feel like it declines, but the decline is never that drastically different from the overall quality of the show.
JJK is a show that doesn't focus on fleshing out as many characters as they possibly can, and a lot of times when they do flesh them out, they do a poor job at it. A prime example of a character that gets fleshed out but in a half-assed way is Toji. Toji is introduced in the Hidden Inventory arc, and we don't really know that much about his character other than the fact that he's Megami's father and he enjoys gambling. From the reader's perspective, we are under the influence that Toji is a deadbeat because the man literally forgets his own son's name. Toji's character doesn't get fleshed out for the entire arc until he's blasted by Gojo. Before he gets killed by Gojo, you don't know much about his character. Whenever they show Toji, you're just sitting there thinking, wow, look at how much aura he has. This dude is so cool, so much aura. Because of the lack of knowledge we had on Toji's character. By the time he had his last minute, cliched anime flashback before his death, I didn't really feel anything. I don't feel anything because I didn't have a strong attachment to his character due to the story not fleshing him out thoroughly. He comes across as an unlikable character for being a deadbeat who can't even remember his son's name. Also for killing Rico, a character who we were able to grow attachment towards, and the anime does not help with this case, as the anime makes him even more unlikable, with him being rude to strangers for absolutely no reason. When Toji dies to Gojo, we get a last minute reveal that he actually cared about his son this whole time, and he had some semblance of humanity in him. It was hard to be emotionally invested in this reveal, because this whole time we thought Toji didn't care about Megumin. So when it was revealed that Toji wanted to leave Megumin in the hands of Gojo, instead of feeling bad for Toji, it was more of a, okay, I guess. Not exactly what I expected. Instead of evenly spreading out the characterization, the whole arc, Toji's characterization gets dumped out at the last minute. The way his character was executed felt like when you're writing an essay, you have an introduction, body paragraphs, and the conclusion, but instead of writing a generous amount for each section, you write 5 words for your introduction, 3 words for the body paragraphs, and 2 paragraphs in the conclusion. And the funny thing is, Toji gets brought back into the story in the next arc, gets the exact same treatment where his character doesn't get fleshed out until the last minute as he dies. From a reader's perspective, you are under the impression that Toji's character was already finished when he died to Gojo, but then the story says, just kidding, and give him another flashback in the Shibuya arc. Toji's second death in the series was more emotional and impactful to the readers compared to his first death, because unlike his first death, we had more context to his character and knew that he cared about Megumin. To see his satisfaction of Megumin not adopting the Zenin clan name was impactful. However, the issue lies with having the readers under the impression that his character was finished in the Hidden Inventory arc. Now, when a character dies in JJK, I'm going to think, I wouldn't be so surprised if they brought him back in the future to give him another big moment. I'm not going to be emotional about this death. This is bad and removes the stakes of the show and also makes death feel like it has less meaning to the story, because what if a character actually does die in the story? And I'm still thinking, maybe they'll appear again in the story. What if the story intends for me to feel sad for this character's death and have a huge feeling of loss? Now I could never have that because there's always going to be a small bit of doubt in the back of my mind when someone else dies. This does not only happen to Toji, by the way, this also happens to Mekamaru. Mekamaru dies, and we are not under the impression that he had a backup plan to communicate and help the other students in the Shibuya arc. He had his big moment when he had his heartfelt conversation with Maiwa on the train, basically the same issue with Toji, and before anyone says, actually, that's not technically Toji, that's not technically Mekamaru, I want you to ask yourself, if this is truly the case, then does that mean that Toji killing himself in front of Megumin meant nothing to his character? Does that mean Mekamaru's conversation with Maiwa meant nothing to his character? If you believe these scenes added to their character, then you believe in the fact that the story brought back the characters to give them a big moment. By making note of this issue, you can easily recognize the same pattern with Nobara's death. When Nobara died initially, the story made it seem like she was dead. Using two examples I had given with Mekamaru and Toji, I want everybody who is watching this video, I want you to make an educated guess on how the story will handle her character. Just pretend you don't know if Nobara is dead or alive. Ignore chapter 267. Using the two examples I gave, make a guess. If you guess that Nobara will appear later in the story and have a big moment despite her being dead, then congratulations, you guessed correctly. And for the people who said Toji and Mekamaru weren't actually resurrected, well, guess what? It's official that Nobara is now a victim of the cliche trope where dead characters are resurrected. For those who are saying it was never confirmed if Nobara was dead, I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but Gege said in an interview that she was indeed dead.
Now, before I talk about Nobara, I'm going to talk about the whole dispute that the JJK community was having about whether or not Nobara was going to come back. Pretend I'm talking as if chapter 267 didn't come out. You had one side saying, Nobara is dead, she's not coming back. And you had one side saying, Nobara has to come back, she has to. I don't know why so many people thought Nobara was guaranteed to come back into the story. The story literally told the readers, don't get your hopes up. There's this one scene in the manga where Yuji asks Megumi what happened to Nobara, and Megumi just gives Yuji the stare. You know what I mean by the stare, right? It's like you're at the hospital and one of your family members just passed away, and the doctor just shakes his head and you know what I'm talking about, right? Now, people will say this isn't a direct confirmation that Nobara is dead because Megumi doesn't explicitly say anything about Nobara's death, and that is true. But you can't tell me that this scene isn't at the very least potential foreshadowing for the readers to prepare themselves that Nobara might actually be dead. So if Nobara actually was dead, you can't say, oh, her death had no build-up. Some people say if Nobara were to die, that would be disappointing because in a story, when you set up an event, it needs to have an outcome. Now, I actually agree that when a story sets up an event, yes, of course, you definitely need some sort of outcome, but not every story has to play the same outcome every time. Let me give you an example. Some people will say if a story sets up an event where there's a gun in the scene, shots must be fired. When a story sets up an event where someone pulls out a gun, it's very, very possible that they're gonna pull that trigger. But just because someone pulls out a gun, does the gun have to go off? If it doesn't go off, will that be disappointing for the viewers and make it poorly written? No. Take a look at Pulp Fiction. The movie starts off with this couple attempting a robbery at a random diner. The moment they pull out their guns, the scene cuts off, and you have no idea what the fuck happens at the diner. At the end of the movie, it cuts back to the couple trying to rob this diner, and you see the full context of the scene. And guess what? No shots fired. The scene ends peacefully when one of the main characters, Jules, takes the dude's gun and convinces the couple to get out of the diner. The event that was set up is that the couple is attempting a robbery at some diner and they pull out their guns. The outcome of that event is that everything is resolved peacefully. People need to understand that when an event is set up in a story, you should consider the possibility of more than one outcome. Let's say Nobara actually did die in the story. People would say her ambiguous death had no outcome, and that is 100% false because the outcome is that she's dead. That's the outcome. Just because the event didn't have the outcome you wanted, that doesn't mean it didn't have any outcome or payoff. Did some of these people never stop to think, maybe the reason why the dude told Yuji that there is a small chance that she might survive is to make Yuji feel better about the situation and man up because he's about to fight Mahito? Now, if it was some shit like, hey Yuji, I have the power to bring Nobara back to life, she will definitely come back, I got you bro. And later in the story, the dude just dies out of nowhere. Now that would actually be poorly written because the story will be establishing the fact that his powers will 100% bring her back to life to then kill him. Except that's not what happened. Basically what I'm trying to say is, before Nobara came back into the story, both sides were valid. Just don't say shit like, because of this, she will come back, or because of this, she will never come back. Instead, say, oh, because of this, she might come back, you know, it's a possibility. You know, say some shit like, oh, because of this, you know, she's probably dead. You know, she's probably not gonna come back.
All Nobara fans, and how can I forget the
Aw, shit. Well, this didn't age well. Damn, bro, why did I put that shit, man? I can't believe I actually had faith in Gege as a writer. Fuck, man. Both sides are valid because her death was ambiguous, offering two possible directions her character can take. It was ambiguous from the very beginning.
What?
It was ambiguous from the very beginning. It was ambiguous from the very beginning. Yeah, it actually wasn't ambiguous from the very beginning. Now that I've gone over why both sides had valid reasons why they thought Nobara was either dead or alive, let's talk about the actual problem of her character being brought back into the story.
Bringing Nobara back to life is terrible writing. The reason why it is bad writing is because the story made it seem like she was dead with the last minute flashback. You dedicate all this time to give me her backstory that serves as secondary source for NyQuil, make me think she's dead and just say, just kidding. The story bringing her back to life is a complete slap in the face for how I reacted to her death, or well, I guess how some people reacted, because I personally didn't feel anything when she died. I just like how it fucked with Yuji's emotions. From a storytelling perspective, the story expects you to be like, damn, Nobara really is dead. This shit is crazy. Gege lost his mind. He's setting a different bar for Shonen Jump. Yeah, for those of you who felt like that when watching Nobara's death, her coming back made the feeling of loss completely disappear, and the next time when a character dies, it's gonna make you think, yeah, I'm just gonna be cautious, maybe this character might be able to come back in some way, shape or form. And when stuff like that happens, it's like, are you robbing yourself of the feeling that you should be feeling? Remember how earlier in the video I talked about how Nobara follows the exact same suit of dead characters being brought back into the story? I want to add on to this and tell everybody that nobody should be surprised about this bad writing. This is a pattern that has been present in the story over and over. So for everyone who thought this was terrible writing from Gege's part, and that Gege crossed the line with Nobara's return, you should also acknowledge that this is not anything new and is something Gege has been doing the whole time. And a lot of people were under the impression that Gege is so different from other manga writers, and when in reality he shares a lot of the same flaws that they do. And I know people are going to come here and say Nobara's death was ambiguous, which shows that her death was not a fake out and that it justifies the writing. Let me repeat myself, Nobara's death was not ambiguous from the very beginning. The story led the readers into thinking she was dead by giving her a dragged out flashback, and a lot of times in anime, when a character is in a life or death scenario and they randomly get a flashback, it either means they are going to get a power up or they are going to die. So when the story hits you with a flashback, many people were thinking, oh no, is she gonna die? Most people thought Nobara was dead. Some people were going through the 5 stages of grief and thought maybe she's still alive. It isn't until Nita comes in when people start to truly question if she was dead or alive. If Nobara's death was truly ambiguous from the start, it would have been ambiguous before Nita appeared. But it wasn't, because Gege wanted the scene to simmer and have the readers manufacture a false feeling of loss for like 5 minutes, just so that he can emotionally manipulate the readers into feeling a particular emotion.
Gojo vs Sukuna is a fight that has been anticipated since the beginning of the show, and is one of the biggest fights ever. Actually, it's probably the most iconic fight of the entire series with how many memes and influence it had on media. The fight might have been mad hype, but was the fight actually good? Well, me personally, I think the fight itself is good, but the writing and execution of the fight is damn near horseshit. Because the story has been building up this fight for the longest time, it felt earned and very satisfying. So honestly, I gotta give some points for that. As for the outcome of the fight, that was also satisfying from a storytelling perspective, because the only way this fight was gonna end was if Gojo lost. Now, I'm not saying Gojo needed to die, he can still be alive, he just needs to lose the fight. And the reason why is because we still need Yuji to fight Sukuna, and it wouldn't feel right if Yuji didn't get his chance to beat Sukuna's ass. I mean, Gojo isn't the only character that was set up to fight Sukuna since the beginning of the show. Sukuna did Yuji dirty throughout the whole series. He was severely disrespectful to him and trolled the living shit out of him countless times. And plus, having the main protagonist fight the main antagonist at the end of the story is a standard direction that many people expect to see. So having Gojo win without Yuji getting his fade with Sukuna would be more disappointing for the story than Gojo dying. So the outcome of the fight was good, but the execution of the outcome? Yeah. Actually, as a matter of fact, nah, screw that. Let's talk about the execution of the fight in general. The fight is very immersive and entertaining, but the thing that brings this fight down is the amount of internal monologues and exposition dump for the whole fight. It's like, I want to be fully immersed into this fight, but I can't, because every couple of pages or so, I get interrupted by exposition dump. Because of this interruption, I can't fully be immersed. It's like I want to enjoy my meal and go all in, but I'm afraid I have too much dip on my chip. The panels where Gojo and Sukuna fight without any internal monologues and exposition dumps was something that should have been done way more. Showing those two fight without any interrupted dialogue was way more immersive and could have been better implemented to display the show don't tell technique. If Gege really wanted to write all those exposition dumps, have all of that information explained before the fight so that the fight doesn't feel interrupted. He doesn't even have to thoroughly explain all of the information step by step. Just give out hints so that the readers can prepare themselves for the information to understand what exactly is happening when Gojo is fighting Sukuna. But given Gege's track record, having him flat out explain to the readers step by step like a manual book would be the bare minimum I could hope for. Honestly, there's two ways Gege could have done to execute this fight better. He could have done all the exposition before the fight, like what I just said, or he could just not bother giving us an explanation, because Gojo and Sukuna are such anomalies of the JJK world that having no explanation to the readers on what the fuck these two are doing would actually not be a bad idea. Even Kusakabe himself said, "Yo, I have no idea what's going on." This could have been a perfect way for Gege to stop writing all of the yapping and get straight to business. I can't lie, at first it seemed like that's what Gege was doing, because right after Kusakabe says he doesn't know what Gojo and Sukuna are even doing, the scene cuts to Gojo fighting Sukuna, and all you see is straight hands. No words, just pure action. This continues for a good amount of pages, until they start yapping again. Why the hell would you let the readers know that not even the characters themselves know what's going on, and still expect me to care about all this expo dump that they're having on these pages? If you haven't read JJK, or at least this part of the story, well, I mean, I assume you've read all of JJK if you're watching this video, but pretend you haven't read this part of the story, alright? Pretend. Bro, damn near every exposition and internal monologue that's in these pages, don't even read that shit. Like, the moment you see someone start to yap, just skip all that shit, bro. It's not even worth reading and will mostly be a waste of your time, because the story keeps adding new rules on top of the rules it had just established. Gege is like that one kid from elementary school where you're playing freeze tag. You're it, and you just tag Gege and you're like, freeze, you're it. And then Gege says, actually, I have the ability to counteract you tagging me, which means I'm actually not it. It's like, at a certain point, it's not even worth investing into these mind games and strategic battles that they're trying to do, because Gege is just gonna pull anything out of his ass for the story. Basically, just skip all the exposition and only look at the art and draw your own conclusions from it. And I promise you, you will have a much better time enjoying this fight, since you won't get interrupted by these bum-ass side characters trying to explain what's going on. I had to go back to the chapters and see how many times Gojo vs Sukuna was interrupted by these bums, and I counted 27 times. 27 fucking times! And it's more than 27 because not only did I lose count, but I also didn't even count the internal monologues that Gojo and Sukuna were having themselves. Not to mention, I also didn't count the goddamn narrator. 27 times is straight from the fucking students. That is atrocious. Now that we've talked about the execution of the fight in general, let's talk about how they executed Gojo's death. Gojo's death was great, but the execution was terrible. The story made it seem like Gojo fucked up Sukuna and even had Kusakabe say Gojo won the fight. There's nothing about this chapter that makes the readers think Gojo is possibly dead at this moment. So when the next chapter starts off with Gojo in the afterlife, it sparks a lot of confusion to the readers. Gege does a terrible job at creating suspense by withholding important information. He does this in order to create cheap shock value so that he can emotionally manipulate the readers in order to get hyped. Not even the exposition dumped throughout the fight revealed or gave any clues that Gojo was the one who actually lost the fight. This is why I said earlier that whenever you see characters start yapping about what's going on, just skip all that dialogue, because it's not really going to help you prepare yourself for what's to come. This poor execution could have been avoided so easily if Gege had just changed a few things. Before Gojo used Hollow Purple, visually demonstrate the explanation of how Sukuna was able to outsmart Gojo instead of giving the explanation after the fight. Not only that, but right as Gojo shoots out Hollow Purple, draw a panel of Gojo with a surprised Pikachu face going, "Oh shit, I dropped my guard." By having Gojo's surprised reaction, it would alarm the readers and make them feel anxious. Even with Kusakabe saying Gojo won, it would still leave the readers thinking, alright, Kusakabe just said Gojo won, but why did Gojo say he dropped his guard? Uh-oh, I have a bad feeling about this. Like, if Gege had done something like this would have made the execution much more tolerable. When I saw how Gojo died, I was surprised that Gege deadass off-screened him, but at the same time, I wasn't that surprised. And you know why I wasn't that surprised? Because Gege lowkey did the same shit back in Hidden Inventory. Remember when Riko's maid got kidnapped and they were making a big deal out of it and how Gojo and Geto were gonna rescue her? They tried creating this suspenseful ass scene, made it seem like they were setting up for them to go rescue her, and boom. The very next page, Riko's maid is at the beach with the gang, and the story just completely skips all of that shit. I was so confused when I first read this in the manga. I thought I was missing a whole ass chapter. I deadass started searching for other manga websites to make sure my shit wasn't fucked. But turns out, I wasn't missing any pages and that Gege simply decided to skip the entire scene and explain what happened through a goddamn schedule sheet. I want to talk about how a lot of the BS writing that's consistent in JJK starts off not after Gojo died, not after the Shibuya arc, not after Hidden Inventory. Nah, it all kinda begins in the Hidden Inventory arc, which is pretty much the beginning of season 2. But before I talk about that, let's continue talking about Gojo versus Sukuna. During this fight, Gojo was more fleshed out as a character and we got to know more about him being isolated, for having an overwhelming amount of strength compared to everyone else. This was cool because Gojo is a very bland character, but the problem with this scene is, yet again, he gets fleshed out at the last minute. I will say that's better than nothing, but it's like still. There was nothing in the story prior to this fight that made a clear implication to the readers that Gojo was lonely for being on top. We have been constantly shown that Gojo is a troll and enjoys using his overwhelming strength to belittle others and as a show off. People say that the whole reason Gojo even wants to cultivate a bunch of kids into becoming strong just like him was to fill the void of isolation that comes from being too strong. But the thing is, when Gojo said he wanted to raise the next generation to become strong, there was nothing in that scene that made the implication that he was doing it to fill that void. When Gojo said he wanted to create that new generation of strong sorcerers, the reason was so that he could reset the Jujutsu world since he thinks the higher ups are all trash, and that killing all the higher ups wouldn't exactly solve the problem, so he decided to prioritize on education. If Gege wanted to let the readers know that Gojo was feeling lonely from being the strongest, he should have done a better job at fleshing out his character throughout the series. He should have done this in the Hidden Inventory arc since that arc focuses a lot on Gojo. But they didn't really do that much with Gojo's character other than the fact that he got a convenient Zenkai boost and started yelling, "Ooga booga, I'm the chosen one." So while I appreciate the fact that Gege fleshed his character out, the timing of it wasn't really impactful and didn't make me care enough because it was too late into the story. Now, something I also want to get out the way in regards to the airport scene is why the hell is Gojo still buddy-buddy with Geto? Like, I get it, he's your best friend, but there's a point where you have to look at your friend and recognize who you're hanging out with. Geto is basically Hitler. This dude is so fucking racist, he decided to kill his own mom and dad for the sake of pursuing his own goal of killing every non-sorcerer to prevent more cursed spirits. Bro, am I dead ass the only person that sees Geto like this? How could anyone fuck with this dude after what he did? In JJK 0, when Geto was defeated, Gojo asked him what his final words were, and the motherfucker literally said, "I hate those monkeys." Bro, I'm sorry, but they're trying to make this scene emotional, and I see Geto there and I'm like, can someone boo his ass out of this goddamn airport? Imagine you're Geto's parents, and you see him in heaven and you're like, oh hell nah, I know I didn't just die to this loser ass son and now he's up in heaven. And why the fuck is Toji even there? He literally shot Riko and robbed her the chance of continuing her life with her friends. Is Riko, her caretaker, Geto, shit, even Gojo, are they not gonna say anything about this man casually hanging around at that airport? What is it with JJK having everyone treating the fucked up characters as if they didn't do nothing? Like, why is Mei Mei's weirdo ass still around here? Gege genuinely screwed up when he made that scene of Mei Mei being inappropriate with her little brother. He should have never added that scene because now I can't take this bitch seriously no more. And the story trying to brush that shit off the side like nothing happened is just pure ass. Now, as for Sukuna fighting everyone, I mean, there's not that much to say really. The whole entire fight is just ass pulls after ass pulls. The story can give out as many explanations as it wants, but that's not going to change the fact that they're ass pulls. At this point in the story, if you're still getting mad at all these ass pulls, I'm not gonna lie, that's kind of on you because you should know by now that there's gonna be ass pulls. The main characters at 1 month to train, and instead of showing us the training, Gege completely skipped that shit and pretty much uses it as an excuse to have a shit ton of ass pulls. Yuji learned RCT, blood manipulation, and put out a domain expansion that he got from Dollar Tree. There's pretty much no point in trying to make theories or educated guesses, shit just happens throughout the entire fight. Gege should have done something like the Hashira training arc from Demon Slayer, where they actually show interactions between characters and what type of training they were doing to prepare themselves. Yeah, there was some stuff I wish they could have expanded a bit more on in the Hashira training arc instead of cock-blocking us and leaving it for the final arcs, but at least it left some breadcrumbs for the readers to feel anticipated for certain things. JJK does none of that shit, which made the pacing of the fights terrible because they kept interrupting us with a flashback from their training over and over and over again. But besides that, let's talk about the characters that Sukuna fought. Kashimo got fleshed out a little when he fought Sukuna, and he also challenged Sukuna's philosophy, so at least there's that. But before that, Kashimo wasn't really interesting. I don't know why so many people were gassing up Kashimo. I swear the only reason is because of his fight with Hakari. After Sukuna kills Kashimo, we see these irrelevant characters that do nothing but stop the momentum of the pacing. Then we get Takaba versus Kenjaku, and honestly, yo, this fight was actually not that bad. This fight fleshes out Takaba really well and adds a lot of depth to his character. Takaba is mad goofy, and it's understandable why that could turn off many people from his character, but we dive into his backstory and see why he's so goofy. We actually know why his personality is like that. This is something that they should have done with Kenjaku because Kenjaku's entire motivation for doing all this fuck shit is that he was curious on the true potential of cursed energy, and he thought it would be fun to explore that curiosity because why not? And it's like, why does he feel like doing it just cuz? It's like if someone woke up one day and decided to shoot up a school and it's like, bro, why do you want to do this? And they say, well, I just felt like it. And you're like, but why do you feel like it? That's kind of how I feel about Kenjaku's character, and it's honestly laughable because how the hell is this goofy ass character who damn near has his dick out have more depth than the actual villains of the show? And to think that Geto was replaced by this bum ass character is crazy. If you haven't read JJK 0 and only read JJK, you will be so disappointed with Kenjaku taking over Geto's place. Not just that, but Miguel coming in out of nowhere to fight Sukuna was already ass to begin with. Imagine if you haven't read JJK 0, that would be ultra ass. This is why JJK 0 is a must read in order to make things more tolerable in the actual series. Moving on from that, I don't really feel like talking about every character that fought Sukuna. I will say that Chozo's death was cool and was a pretty good scene. Yuta versus Sukuna, I mean, I don't really care. Higuruma's death was just whatever. Andy, Toge would have been killed by the feedback. Salmon roll. Wait, what the? I know that's not who I think it is. Wait, hold on. No, wait, hold on. What? Wait, hold on. Sukuna was just playing around. He was capable of killing me whenever he wanted, and if someone like Kotsu were there, he would have. Wait, hold on. No, don't tell me. Don't tell me that's who I think it is. Don't. Bro, are you fucking kidding me? Bro, what the fuck was the whole point of that scene when he was like, quote unquote, dying? Bro, you know how goofy that scene looks now that we know that he's alive? Bro, what the Bro, now when you go back to that chapter looks so goofy. Higuruma looks goofy as fuck. This man's being dramatic and shit. He's putting his hand all up in the air. He's like telling Yuji, Yuji, you got it from here, bro. Like they had this whole parallel with Nanami, trying to make it seem like he was actually dead. Bro, get the fuck out of here with this dog shit, man. Bro, why do I keep letting myself get manipulated by this freaking bum ass author? This fucking bum ass author, fucking story. Todo and Yuji versus Sukuna was just whatever. Todo literally lost his boogie woogie technique when he fought Mahito, but now his technique is back again. That shit pretty much has no consequences. Okay, now remember earlier I said I was going to talk about how the consistent trash writing for JJK actually began in hidden inventory? Yeah, let me hop back on that real quick. So there's a scene where Geto fights this random no-name curse user. I don't care about this old man at all. The story dedicated way too much time to this NPC, gave him a whole ass flashback. This was such a waste of time. They should have wrapped this shit up in like 2 pages or just not show us the fight. Rico's caretaker gets kidnapped. They build all the suspense, manipulate the readers into thinking they were gonna show us them trying to rescue her, to then say psych and skip everything. Toji and Gojo fight. Toji stabs Gojo in the neck, drags the weapon down, stabs the living shit out of him like 10 more times, and stabs him through his forehead. The next chapter, apparently Gojo is completely okay and survives getting obliterated by Toji by learning reverse curse technique on the verge of death. How the fuck does this dude Gojo have plot armor in a goddamn flashback? I understand because this is a flashback, obviously Gojo can't be dead since he's alive in the prison, but Gege still found a way to squeeze in some bullshit asshole to save Gojo. Then, Toji out of nowhere talks about wanting to kill Gojo because he wanted to destroy the Jujutsu world for self-affirmation, saying that he deviated from his true self and how he doesn't take work for free. Even though prior to this moment, that's not how the story presented his character to be. The lack of clues that could have been built for this revelation made the scene completely emotionless for the readers. It's also revealed out of nowhere that Toji actually does care for his son, when this whole time we were under the impression that he was a deadbeat who didn't give 2 shits about him. The whole goal of the hidden inventory arc was for Gojo and Geto to find a star plasma vessel, get her to Tengen so that Tengen doesn't evolve. The star plasma vessel gets killed by Toji and now Tengen has no choice but to evolve. Oh, you thought the star plasma vessel dying actually had a consequence to Tengen's evolution? Psych! Apparently this whole time there was another star plasma vessel or another vessel to be born. Oh wait, you thought there was another star plasma vessel other than Rico? Psych! Apparently there never was, and we later learned that Tengen didn't merge with a vessel. Like, goddamn, is it this, is it that, is it this, or is it that? Like, which one is it? Holy shit, how many times is the author gonna break my ankles? I mean, it's cool that this whole time Rico's death actually did have a consequence, but the way the story delivers the execution makes me think, what the fuck am I even supposed to believe in? Moving on to Shibuya, we find out that Mechamaru is the mole, and this whole mole subplot was barely fleshed out and was barely mentioned at all before this arc, making the pacing feel way too fast. Yuji also fights a grasshopper in this arc. Yes, a fucking grasshopper, and they dedicated way too much time for this fight. They even went as far as to give an entire exposition dump on the grasshopper plague, information that's pretty much a complete waste of time. Mechamaru came back into the story as a literal plot device. This contingency plan came out of nowhere and should have been clarified before or around the time Mechamaru died, instead of withholding information just for a poorly executed plot twist. Then we see these 3 random characters that came out of nowhere. We have no idea who these people even are, and apparently these old people felt confined because they were able to have good lives by killing and collecting as much money as they wanted up until Gojo was born. Wow, I really don't care about these characters at all. If anything, this could have been an opportunity for Gege to dive into how Gojo feels lonely for being the strongest, but that doesn't happen. Not only that, but these characters brought Toji back into the story. You thought Toji was forever dead and that his character was concluded in the hidden inventory arc? Well, you thought wrong, because now Toji was brought back in a way that has never been established in the story prior to this event. Remember how Toji barely got fleshed out until right before he died in the hidden inventory arc? The exact same shit happens in the Shibuya arc. Then we have Mei fight an NPC in which the story dedicates too much screen time. Yuji fights Chozo and the fight gets interrupted because apparently this whole time they're both related, and the way this shit works is that when Chozo's brothers die, he gets a sensation that they're dead. Except, Yuji didn't even die in this scene, so the idea of Chozo being able to get that sensation when they simply die is not true. For some reason, right before he was gonna kill Yuji, he starts spazzing out. But when Chozo's other brothers died, he was calm and composed. And also, if Chozo can sense Yuji's death, then why didn't he have any sensation when Yuji momentarily died in the Itadori extermination arc? These 2 teenagers were forgettable. Sukuna kills Jogo, and Jogo gets transported into some sort of dreamlike sequence or some sort of afterlife. How the fuck did Sukuna get here? Is this a different dimension that they're in? Is Sukuna reading Jogo's thoughts? If all of this isn't real and it's just pure symbolism, how the fuck is Sukuna even here talking to Jogo? Right before Nobara dies, she gets a boring ass flashback and the story manipulates us into thinking she's dead. A few chapters later, the story says psych, then we move on to the next arc, the Itadori extermination arc. We're under the impression that Yuta wants to kill Yuji because of what happened in Shibuya, only for the story to manipulate the readers and say psych, Yuta was never trying to kill Yuji like that. Then we move on to the next arc, the preparation arc, where Maki kills her entire clan. Maki and her sister are stuck in this place, and out of nowhere there's this mechanic of how if Maki's sister dies, then Maki will be gifted the full potential of Heavenly Restriction, which should have been properly established or hinted at when they fought each other in the Kyoto Goodwill event. Instead, they introduced the mechanic in the exact same chapter she gets the power up. Oh wait, you thought this was the last time Maki gets an ass pull power up? Well, you thought wrong, because she gets another ass pull in Cooling Games by these random ass sumo wrestlers that came out of nowhere. Then we move on to Cooling Games, and I don't even want to talk about Cooling Games. Instead, I'm just going to show you a list of characters that I give zero fucks about.
In chapter 145, Angel is revealed for the first time and has a convenient ability to extinguish curse techniques, which is something that will be used to help unseal Gojo. Angel is a mid character and is only used as a plot device. Her character isn't interesting at all whatsoever, and it's hard to care about this character at all when she's being introduced with the plot needed for her. The story should have talked more about the existence of other incarnated characters like Angel and Yorozu, because I, for the love of God, cannot care for those characters at all, since both of them were simply used as plot devices to further the plot. Sure, you could say that they at least had personality and had reasons as to why they were doing what they were doing, but those elements to their characters weren't enough to compensate with how late they were put into the story. First, let's talk about Angel. So Megami and the boys are trying to find her to unseal Gojo, and they don't really know where she is. In the meantime, Megami is fighting a bunch of these characters that we give zero fucks about, and after the fight is concluded, Megami falls asleep on the ground, and boom, Angel, or I guess I should say Hana, the vessel of Angel, just appears out of nowhere and takes Megamin. From a reader's perspective, I'm thinking, why is she saving Megamin? And the story hasn't fleshed it out at all during the point where she is saving Megamin, so there's zero breadcrumbs, nothing that I could latch onto and make an educated guess to why she's even doing this. So off rip, this scene is kinda sketchy, but then I was like, hold on, I should let the story cook, let's see what Gege has to offer. Eventually, when things calm down, Megami asks Angel why she saved him, and apparently it was because they met each other when they were kids. Why didn't Gege show this earlier in the series? Gege should have shown this flashback of Kin Megami seeing Hana during the early acts in JJK. This character is fucking mid and is only needed when the plot demands her. Now, as for Tsumiki, the story could have put more effort into fleshing out her character in the death paying arc when Megami was having the flashback, because of the lack of effort and time that was dedicated to her character, and I can't bring myself to care for Tsumiki, and plus Tsumiki is pretty much a plot device as well, only to serve Kenjaku's plan and to break Megami's spirit so that Sukuna could have better control. And I haven't talked about Tsumiki's incarnation. Yorozu fucking sucks and appeared way too late in the story, just like Angel, and is only there because the plot needs her. A whole dialogue with Sukuna about love and how she wanted to marry him was so cringe. I was asking myself, what the fuck am I reading? Yuki is a character that has been shown throughout the series, and we barely knew anything about her character until the very end, which you shouldn't even be surprised about since this is typical for JJK. The first time we ever see Yuki is during the Kyoto Goodwill event arc, when we see a flashback of Todo when he was a little kid. And you see Yuki standing by her motorcycle asking him, what kind of girls are you into? Not too sure why you as a grown woman is asking a little boy that question, but so we get back to this little flashback of Yuki and Todo meeting, and their relationship is never fleshed out in the story. ever again. So honestly, her introduction just felt like a waste of time in retrospect. But other than that, there's not much to talk about her character besides her conversation with Tengen. Oh yeah, her conversation with Tengen is right before she dies, so this conversation has no emotional value to the readers at all. We get a better understanding of her character and why she has some sort of grudge against Tengen. We get to see she wants to hold the responsibility of making sure Tengen is burdened by her nonchalant attitude towards the star plasma vessels. This was a nice moment, but what makes this scene so mid is that there are zero prior moments in the series that shows their dynamic and who they individually are as characters. Having yourself invested into a character would just be a waste of time. Also, there's something I want to talk about in regards to a conversation with Tengen. The conversation starts off with her asking Tengen if there were any star plasma vessels other than herself and Riko 12 years ago. Tengen implies that there were other vessels. Tengen also says that there are voices in her head, voices of the former star plasma vessels, and that she can't hear these voices. Because Yuki is a former star vessel, apparently she has the ability to hear their voices in Tengen's mind. If Yuki has the ability, then why did she even ask Tengen if there were any other vessels besides her and Riko? She can literally hear the voices from the other vessels and Tengen's head, so why would she even ask that question? You know, I'm just going to give this the benefit of the doubt and say that Yuki was just asking as some sort of conversation starter.
Sukuna's death in the end was pretty good. A lot of people were hating on this chapter and said that this chapter was terrible, but honestly, was it really that bad? The quality of this chapter is pretty consistent with what we've gone for the past 100+ chapters. Just straight mid. The reason why I say this chapter isn't terrible like how a lot of people did is that we pretty much got what we wanted for a lot of things. Sukuna dying and going out like a little bitch was very rewarding and satisfying. Him dying by Yuji was even more satisfying. We finally got Megumi back, and now Megumi isn't depressed anymore. Megumi finally finds out what happened to his father through Gojo's letter, and the story has addressed this a few times on how Gojo wanted to tell Megumi about his father. I'm not gonna lie, when Megumi was laughing at Gojo saying some out-of-pocket shit about how he killed his father, I thought that shit was kind of funny. It's in character for Gojo to say that since he was gonna casually tell Megumi as a kid that he killed his father like that. Megumi laughing about the fact that his dad got killed by Gojo is also in line with his character because that boy Megumi does not give a flying fuck about his father. I honestly thought Gege was never gonna have Gojo tell Megumi about what happened to his father, but I'm glad he did, and it felt satisfying to see it finally happen. Yeah, it might not have been the biggest reaction ever, but it's not like it was a major plot point that needed to have a crazy payoff. Now, Nobara being back with the trio, you guys should already know how I feel about this. Her return to the story is fucking ass. She should have stayed dead, but it is what it is. A lot of people were mad that the fight between Hikari and Urame was off screen, but I'm actually happy that they skipped the fight. The reason why I'm glad that Gege skipped it is because I don't give two shits about Urame, and Hikari is just not that interesting of a character. I honestly don't understand why people were gassing up this fight so much. Were people really that excited to watch a gambling addict fight a dick rider? They're both mid characters, especially Urame. I'm actually surprised that Gege didn't skip this fight because Gege usually shows the whole fight even if the characters are boring as hell. If Gege has the ability to skip fights that contain mid characters, he should have done this way more in the Shibuya arc and Colon games, where there's a shit ton of fights that are centered around characters that are barely fleshed out and have no emotional resonance with the readers. Urame ending her life after realizing Sukuna died is very fitting for her character. Imagine your whole entire character is centered around you being a dick eater. Urame has to be one of the worst characters in the entire series. She has zero personality, no goals of her own, no motivation. Her only personality is that she likes to ride Sukuna's dick. So I talked about the positive elements of this chapter that I personally enjoy, but let's talk about the execution of those scenes. Megumi developing as a character, going from being depressed to saying that he wants to try living for others, was kind of half-assed and should have been more properly fleshed out because in chapter 266, he literally said he's had enough. Yuji pretty much talked no Jutsu's Megumi, and we don't see Megumi's thought process on Yuji's words at all. We don't see Megumi until the beginning of this chapter, and all of a sudden he developed as a character. The story pretty much rushed this development and we didn't get to see the process of that development. We pretty much went from point A to point B by skipping the journey. Now, I want to talk about Yuji's final speech to Sukuna. Him saying, "You are me" to Sukuna was an obvious callback to when he said, "I am you" to Mahito back in the Shibuya arc. And honestly, this scene kinda sucks. Yuji rambles on about his philosophy on how Sukuna is no different from him because they all started off as human and that the person they morph into is determined by the circumstances that they're in. Yuji then tries giving Sukuna a second chance and tells him he can try changing his mentality, and I'm like, bro, Sukuna used you, violated you, committed mass murder, caused mass destruction because he found it aesthetic to do so. The fact that Yuji is even entertaining the idea of hearing Sukuna out is crazy. I don't give a fuck if Sukuna could have went a different path if things were different. Look Yuji, if you think someone as evil as Sukuna can have a second chance, hey, that's on you. But think about the others. Imagine if Sukuna actually accepted Yuji's offer, what would the other Jujutsu sorcerers think of that decision? Like, I could understand if Sukuna made a mistake and he fucked up a little, but nah, this dude is an evil piece of shit. Don't even entertain the idea of him trying to find the value of life. Fuck Sukuna. So, remember how I said a bunch of people were hating on chapter 268? I low-key feel like I was one of the few people that didn't think it was terrible. I thought it was overhated and that the chapter was overall just mid. But chapter 269? Man, this chapter is ass. The chapter starts off with Mei Mei and I'm over here still wondering why she's still alive. I don't like her. You don't like her. I don't think there's anybody out there who genuinely enjoys her character. The fact that she's still chilling with the rest of the characters makes me shake my head. You know how a lot of people were making memes about JJK and how they were calling it Disney Kaisen? Well, I guess in a way you could say that this ending is depressing and tragic because the groomer is still kicking back with the rest of the crew. And this is on the same level as EDP coming over to your house. You're with all your friends, right? You're having a birthday party and EDP is there. It's like if you're expected to take a picture with everyone and EDP is just standing there and you're expected to smile like it's all rainbows and sunshine. That's pretty much how it feels with Mei Mei still being around. Moving on from that, we find out that Yuta and Higuruma are actually alive. You guys should already know how I feel about Higuruma being alive. I showed my reaction earlier in the video. As for Yuta, I'm not gonna lie, I was kinda expecting him to not die, so I'm not too mad that he's alive. A lot of people hated it, and I can't even blame those people because Yuta got smoked by Sukuna and then he got smoked the second time when he turned into Gojo. Not only that, but Rika was crying like he was dead, so for all of you guys who hated this, I understand y'all 100%. I think the reason why I didn't really mind it is because I don't really care about Yuta as a character. I like Higuruma way more than Yuta and I find him more interesting as a character. So to see Higuruma fall victim to this trash writing affected me way more than Yuta being alive. This chapter also goes over the lore over Simple Domain and I'm not too sure who asked for this. This shit is not even worth reading and the fact that they talk about Simple Domain for like half the chapter is crazy. This chapter was better than chapter 269 in my opinion, but I don't think it was a good chapter. It was actually pretty mid. Maybe even below mid because most of the pages just feel like a waste of time. The reason why it feels like a waste of time is because they dedicate a bunch of pages on characters that we barely give two shits about. So the chapter opens up with Megumi and Shoko standing in front of Tsumiki's grave. This scene was just whatever. I'm not saying it was bad, but there wasn't really anything great about it despite it being her gravestone. Tsumiki as a character wasn't fleshed out enough to the point where I care about her character like that. It was a cool little scene for Megumi though, but it's just nothing really major. They show us a few panels of Shoko looking at her cigarette and she throws the whole entire pack in the trash. I mean, okay, cool. Basically what you can infer from that scene is that she quit smoking and it correlates with her character trait of being a smoker. She started smoking in the Shibuya arc, signifying the stress she was having from all the shit that's going on. And now this pretty much concludes it. That's not really enough to make me feel invested in her character. She was the least interesting character out of Gojo and Geto. She was mostly just used as a plot device to heal other characters. So this scene of her throwing away her cigarettes doesn't even hit that hard. Like I said again, it's not bad, it's just whatever. There's nothing really great about it. And then you see Maki talking to the sumo wrestlers, aka the plot devices that help Maki get her second ass pull and reaching her true potential. Then you get Charles Bernard, the manga artist from Calling Games that I genuinely don't care for. Then you got Takuba talking to a man who pretty much looks just like Kenjaku. Only thing is they cover his face in this chapter, which leads the readers to make different interpretations on why Gege decided to cover his face. For anyone out there who was mad and was saying, "Aw shit, Kenjaku is back?" I mean, at this point, are we even surprised? It doesn't even matter whether Kenjaku is dead or alive. Anything that happens, I'm just not gonna be surprised. We all should just be observing instead of investing. That way, you won't set yourself up to disappointment. This chapter also shows one of the kids that went to the same school as Yuji, and who cares about any of the dialogue that's being spit out in these panels from these bland ass characters. Honestly, what they should have done is just make the chapter shorter and take out a bunch of these scenes that revolve around NPCs that we have no emotional attachment towards. The end of the chapter pretty much introduces a new plot point for the final chapter. The overall plot of JJK has been concluded for a few chapters since Sukuna died, and seeing the setup for this new conflict they have take this much screen time makes it boring to watch, especially since we know for sure that there's only one chapter left. It's like, wrap this shit up. Overall, I don't think JJK had a crazy fall off. I do think the quality of the story did have a decline, but the decline kind of happened a long time ago. Season 1 of JJK, which covers the first 4 arcs, was pretty decent. It actually dedicated its time in fleshing out some of the characters such as the Kyoto students. The story actually tried fleshing out Mai, Miwa, Momo, Mekamaru, Norutoshi, and etc. I'm not saying they went crazy with the characterization, but the story did make an attempt in fleshing them out, even if it was just a little bit. Even Miwa, who is known for being useless, was fleshed out to be a character that's in the position she's in due to financial reasons. Unfortunately, the story doesn't expand too much on these characters after season 1. Also, I want to point out that season 1 has my favorite arc of the entire series, the Versus Mahito arc. This arc has Junpei, who is well fleshed out, has impact in the story. We're able to sympathize with his character despite him becoming a bad guy. His dynamic and friendship with Yuji was properly fleshed out, we knew his backstory, and he had a personality. The stakes and tension were actually high in this arc as you care for the characters, and the dynamic between Mahito and Yuji was intriguing to watch. Season 1 isn't groundbreaking, but it was pretty solid. If I had to give my personal rating for JJK as a series, I would rate it a 7 out of 10 based off of season 1. If I wanted to be really nice, shit, I might bump it up to a 7.5 or an 8 out of 10 because that's how much I messed with the Mahito arc. As for season 2, I would rate JJK a 6 out of 10, and after the Shibuya arc, I would rate JJK a 5 or 4 out of 10. After reading those final chapters, I can confidently say that JJK is at the very least a below average series. One thing I want to talk about in regards to this chapter is the flashback with Gojo and Yuji. A few chapters ago when Yuji, Nobara, and Megumi were reading letters, Yuji said he already had a conversation with Gojo, which is why he didn't get any letters. So I thought it was nice to see this scene, but this scene could have been a lot better if we saw it before Gojo fought Sukuna. Showing the conversation before the fight would have made Gojo's death a lot more impactful, since it correlates with how Gojo said nobody is going to remember him. That way, when Sukuna tells Gojo that he will never forget him for as long as he lives, it will emotionally resonate with the readers a lot more when reading that scene because you will be able to connect the dots with the conversation Gojo had with Yuji. The conversation with Yuji and Gojo being shown in the final chapter wasn't terrible writing, but it just would have made the story hit a lot more if it was shown before the whole entire fight. But Gege always likes to push things at the very last minute, so this is not really unexpected, I would say. Also, another thing I want to point out, the people who are genuinely wishing that Gojo would come back in the final chapters just lets me know that a lot of y'all don't give a fuck about the writing. Like, it's one thing to predict that he would come back because, you know, Gege is a shitty writer, but to genuinely want him to come back because he's your blue-eyed daddy it just lets me know that a lot of you guys don't even care about stakes. Y'all don't care about tension. Yeah, like, y'all just don't care. If Gojo were to come back in the series, that would have made the entire airport scene meaningless. The emotional value that was invested into that scene would have been completely stripped away from the readers. And the crazy part about all of this is that Gojo's death was horribly executed in the first place. So the fact that these Gojo fangirls wanted their glorious king to come back just shows me Gege can get away with a lot of stuff. The thing that genuinely shocked me was seeing the amount of people who were getting mad over Gege and calling him a bad writer for not bringing Gojo back. I can't believe that we as a society have come to a point in which bringing dead characters back to life or just bringing characters that you assume were dead back into the story is considered good writing. Remember earlier in the video when we were talking about how fake out deaths were bad for the story? Because now that when a character dies, you're always going to have that small bit of doubt in the back of your head thinking this character might still come back in the future. Remember how we said this was bad for the viewers because when a character actually does die in the story, and you're not feeling too emotional about it because you still have that doubt, you know, because you still think the story might possibly bring that character back, well, these tweets perfectly exemplify that issue because they literally had Gojo cut in half. They had a whole scene of him being in the airport, which signifies the afterlife, and these people still thought, oh, he might still come back. Now with hindsight, the people who were genuinely wishing that Gojo would come back and thinking it was going to be good for the writing, now realize that they pretty much robbed themselves of the feeling that they should have been feeling when Gojo died. Instead of feeling sad for his death, people were having doubt. People were making theories on how he was going to come back into the story. You now see the issue, right? Death isn't really that meaningful in JJK because it causes problems like this. You can literally dedicate a whole entire flashback, a whole scene of someone being in the afterlife, and these people will still not be able to feel the emotional response that the story expects you to feel because the story kept on breaking your ankles over and over. So for the people who think the writing completely fell off these past 5 chapters, I'm sorry to tell you, but the writing of these 5 chapters is somewhat consistent with the quality we've been receiving for the past 100 plus chapters. This is something many people should have been expecting. In conclusion, the thing I really wanted to say with this video is that JJK didn't suddenly get worse. The problems have been there since the beginning of the show, and that people were too blind to recognize those flaws. Even though Season 1 decided to take its time to flesh out some of the side characters, the execution for how they fleshed out characters was still poorly done. The exposition has always been bad throughout the entire series, and JJK does a terrible job at show don't tell. JJK was never peak. It was never even peak shonen. JJK was never the series y'all were hyping it up to be.